But all of this conversation really makes me think about something that's a lot broader, which is what makes us human. And I look at a lot of the things that are done in our space, and most of the implementations that I see around technology are about either getting rid entirely of the human or making the human being become more machine-like. And I think people who do that, they fundamentally miss the point about what language is. Language, yes, it's a medium in which communication takes place, but language is about doubt. Language is about wondering. Language is about emotional connection. Language is about these things that are very unmachine-like. And our hypothesis, what we believe in that I think is fascinating, is that when you take the more commoditized aspects of language, the more machine-like aspects of language. For instance, I want to go there, I want to do this. And when you get the propositional structure of a sentence well taken care of through this context-sensitive translate, there is a point of view that says, well, now you're stripping away what the human does, because after all, if the human isn't typing, what are they doing? In my point of view, you're actually opening up an entire new universe of language that's a lot more reflective, that's a lot more about doubting, that's a lot more about wondering, that's a lot more about feeling. And in my personal perspective, that is what makes us human. And a lot of the argument that I feel and experience over AI, which I love, is that if I'm able to take care of this more mechanical, boring stuff, for me at least, that's boring stuff, the mechanical stuff, I'm able to let my mind loose. I'm able to focus on my higher mental faculties. I'm able to focus on my ability to self-reflect, to self-criticize, to wonder, to doubt, to connect. And those are the things that keep me moving. And it's particularly interesting because I notice that the more I introduce machines into my workflow, the more human I become. I'm not using machines in ways that replace me at all. I'll never have, for instance, a machine type out an email for me or a post for me or something that requires any kind of personal investment on my end. Same thing during the translation process. I will become the owner of anything that the machine offers me, no matter how sophisticated the AI apparatus that we're using. Even if it's 100% correct, I'm still going to process it. I'm still going to reflect over it. I'm still going to make it mine, even if it's just by checking that box. And even if that single sentence can't be directly attributed to me, if you get a patchwork of hundreds of sentences, you'll be able to see a pattern that is pretty unique to me. I'll be able to see my fingerprint, if not in a single sentence, in a corpus of sentences. And I realize that the burstiness that I have, these little quirks, these little features in my language, whether sometimes it's using a passive voice where I shouldn't be, sometimes it's using an awkward sentence construction, sometimes it's borrowing a vocabulary that's coming a little bit from a different language, still is English, but not commonly used. And all of this quirkiness, that is what makes me me. And AI in our application, for me at least, clearly makes me more me. And from an economic perspective, that's super important as well, because the more me I become, the more valuable I become, the less of a commodity I become. So I think one thing that really a lot of people are uncomfortable with is as you move into this scenery where that baseline gets more well taken care of, there is more room and also more emptiness around massaging these reflective capabilities that are not really well trained, in my opinion, by the entire educational system in which most of us have undergone and in order to shape our minds and our ability to interact socially. So there's this challenge where most of us, I would argue, don't have super developed literary deconstruction capabilities, all of this philosophical background that allows us to really understand discourse from its fundamental pillars, rip it apart, pull it back together, understand all of these different point of views. We're not built that way from an educational perspective. And then from a societal perspective, we're even further encouraged to just stick to the headlines, to just have these very top-level conversations instead of really digging into the details, instead of really digging into the use cases, instead of having more mature, educated dialogue around differences. And it's really fascinating to see how that materializes when you have all of this AI components that are embedded in a workflow, because if you are working at this very superficial level, there is a very high chance that you will be replaced, and that your work, which is currently valued at X, will be valued at 1/10 of X. It will lose value because that is replaceable. But when you dig deeper, when you talk about the value of doubt, the value of reflection, the value of wondering, the value of dreaming, the value of imagining, those are things that, sure, maybe you can mimic through a large language model, but those are things that are intrinsically human, that have an embodiment in who we are, what we do, where we're going. And I just find it fascinating that when you have a very clear vision over what you're trying to achieve as far as an end goal for how, for instance, valuable human emotions are, how valuable human interactions are, when you have this kind of value system, not just the way you develop technology, but the way you apply it, becomes very different. So that's what we believe in as a collective in BureauWorks. We believe that the tech is there to make us more human, and it's not just a BS claim. We see how little subtleties in our tech will either make us more in control or less in control. It will make us have more agency or less agency. Will either make us have the ability to access these higher cognitive faculties or lower cognitive faculties. And the brilliance of this is that in the end, discrepancies, dialogues, differences, that's what makes us human. That's what makes the language bubble, a living thing, an evolving thing. And we, by any means, if we lose that, we're lost as a society. So our goal is to make our little small contribution in this pond towards embracing these differences through dialogue. And that's what BureauWorks is all about.